Welcome to this new episode of The Unheard. Today, our guest is the beautiful Jamaica. Hi,
Hello,
how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
So, where do you live?
I live in Wichita, Kansas, in the United States.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people, I don't know how other countries think of Kansas, but I know that in the US we're known as the land of Oz because of the movie.
The
But
Wizard? Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz, yes, thank you. It's actually nothing like that. We've got a pretty big metropolitan city area. We do have a lot of farm lands and stuff like that on the outskirts of the city and stuff, but for the most part, um, it's city life. So
Yeah. And so, can I ask how old you are?
yeah, I am 48.
Okay. And so I really wanted to know, because we're going to be discussing mental health and chronic illnesses too, also a little bit of Ren because you're a renegade. But so
Of
I
course.
really wanted to know why you decided to do this now. Why do you think this is the right time in your life to have this conversation with me and to go, to be very open and to go public about what you went through and your life.
Well, I have Well, to start off, I want to say it's because I really, really enjoy watching your videos with
Oh,
the renegades, whether it be the reactors or the us unheard. Um,
thank you.
it just really, yeah, it really. I think it's very lovely and just I don't know. I have a lot of respect for you for giving us a safe space to tell our stories and to talk about things that we've gone through because I know that there's probably a lot of spaces out there that, could be safe places, but I've got my therapy that I go to, and of course, some of my family, not all of them, but really, I don't do a lot of in depth talking about stuff
Yeah.
on a regular basis. So, but
Yeah.
it was because I really respected what you're doing here with trying to shed more light and get more awareness for chronic illness and mental illness, really, because I think a lot of renegades suffer from one or the other or both.
Thank you so much for saying that. It is I think for me it was really important to create something around those subjects because I myself have suffered of many different mental struggles and I've also suffered from chronic illness. So I know I have a lot of friends around me who have, the same issues. And I think we all, to a certain measure, go through different situations in our lives that are difficult. And it's always, I think, helpful to listen to other stories and to people where you can relate to because it helps you to feel heard and seen and not so lonely in your own struggles. So that's really why I did this. I'm really grateful you said that. That's touches me a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's very important, and I just wish that there were more people like you and Ren who are, trying to get the the information out there and get the voices out there. And you know I didn't talk about a lot of stuff for a really long time, but once I started therapy and started to really um, get my own voice back and get be in a good headspace as well, that has made me be more vocal about my struggles, whether it be with my childhood trauma, abuse, my mental illness,
Mhm.
illnesses.
Yeah.
um, and so I've been talking more about that stuff when before I would have been way too embarrassed and ashamed and all of that. And um, I'm working on those things. So I'm trying to put myself out there more. whether it be for talking about mental health
Yeah.
or chronic illness, or just, you know, just putting myself out more, because I have always been a very kind of shy, introverted person for the most part, especially when it comes to like my private life. Once I became an adult, um, I didn't really have anybody that I knew that had mental health struggles, you know.
Mm.
And as the years went on, I did come across some people that had, you know, issues with anxiety and things like that, which I have generalized anxiety, so that was like, okay, you know, I understand how you feel,
Yeah.
that it's terrifying. And the difference from now and 20 years ago or 30 years ago is extremely different, you know, as far as talking about it and things like that. And I think that um, I think the happiest about with the way that this keeps evolving, and people are, you know, more and more people are talking about their struggles. Celebrities are talking
Hmm.
about, you know, their struggles
Yeah.
with mental health
Yeah.
or mental illness and things like that. And the thing that I think that touches me the most is that there's more and more men who are coming forward and talking about
Yeah.
it, because for the longest time, you know, there was this, for them especially,
Yeah.
it was, you know, they were seen to be weak. You know, it's like, oh, it's in your head, get over it, you're going to be fine, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. And it's like, I'm so glad that that narrative has changed, and that more and more men are feeling comfortable enough to talk about their struggles too, because, you know, I think a lot of the times in society, you know, the men are supposed to be the ones who are the caregivers, they're the strong ones, they keep everything together and things like that. And they don't want to be seen as weak.
Yeah.
And what I truly believe is that people who struggle with mental illness or anything mental, having to do with your mental state, I think those are the strongest people, because you wake up every day knowing that the next day is going to be, or may not be, a rough day.
Hmm.
And, you know, and on those rough days, sometimes you still have to get up and do life. You can't just lay in bed all the time.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things I think that the progress with this has made me the happiest, is knowing that men are now a lot less afraid to go and get help, talk about their problems and things like that. And yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also think that um, to have, you know, the conversation go in this direction, and for men to be able to connect more to their emotions is really
Mhm.
key to a lot of issues between men and women. And I think there is a fundamental correlation between masculine violence and not being in touch with your own emotions, or not being able to express yourself as a man. And so I think if we continue in this direction, then it'll help, you know, so many different issues that have to do with how men can express their feelings, and how they can, you know, go learn how to have, you know, good relationships to women in particular, if they are
Mhm.
feeling more at ease with their own emotions. So I think that's really, really important. But I think that goes back to how we are raised, and, you know, the nurturing side of things. So that leads on to my next question with you is in what kind of household were you raised?
Um, that one's going to be complicated. uh, I I grew up in two different households. My biological mother was 14 when she got pregnant with me, and my biological father was 19.
Hmm.
So my mom was 15 when she ended up having me, and by the time she was uh, 18, she was living on her own, and I had three younger sisters by the time I was four, five. I was five. and I had 3 baby sisters. And it was, my mom got into the wrong crowd. She was an alcoholic, still is an alcoholic, but she's much better now. But at that time, she was into drugs as well.
Mhm.
And when the sister just under me in age was born, my mom didn't keep her for very long.
Yeah.
My sister ended up being taken away.
Mhm.
And then my mom got married and had my 2 youngest sisters. And that marriage was very toxic and volatile and scary. And they were both very big into drugs and alcohol together. And there was a lot of physical, verbal violence. And um, at that time, there were several incidences where I feared for my sisters' lives. I never took my own into account, which I don't know why, but I was always worried about protecting my sisters. So when my mom and stepdad would get into it, and I had this, my danger senses started spiking up, and
Mhm.
I would grab my 2 baby sisters and I would push them under a bed, and I would get under there with them so that if anybody came after us, they would get me first and wouldn't get my baby sisters.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, I think about, I was about, I was still 5 when they split up and my 2 baby sisters went with their dad. And so it was just my mom and I.
Okay.
And she was still really heavy into drugs and alcohol. So much so that there were points when I think she forgot she had a child.
Yeah.
And I know that she loved me. I know that, and still does to this day. And I love her. But there were times when I would be alone for days, weeks, at a time by myself, home alone with no adult, no person to, bathe me, clothe me, give me, walk me to school or
How,
anything like that.
how
And
old were
so,
you then?
this would be at 6, between 5 and 6. Um, and, so I learned really quickly how to, kind of, hang around with some neighborhood kids when I was feeling hungry, and I would say, "Hey, let's go play in your apartment," and and I did that because I knew that in that time we're talking very early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, that their mom wasn't going to say, "Hey, go home." They were going to say, "Hey, stay,
Yeah.
have dinner."
Yeah.
And so that's what I did a lot, was I would hang around and wait to be invited to dinner, because we had no food in my house, when my mom was gone. And, when I was able to wake up, um, if I thought it was early enough in the morning, I would get dressed and I would walk to school, so I could get free lunch. And, then, finally, it was just before I turned 7. Um, my mom had dropped me off at my aunt's house for her to watch me, and it was supposed to be just for the night. And I didn't mind it. My aunt had a couple of kids, so I had my cousins to play with.
Yeah.
But my mom ended up being gone for weeks.
Yeah.
And, so my aunt was like, at her wit's end. She didn't know what to do with me, and because nobody could get a hold of my mom. And so she called my ex stepdad, who I was terrified of.
Yeah.
And he ended up coming to get me, and it was just him in his truck. And I remember being terrified that I thought he'd pick me up because he was going to kill me and drop me off somewhere. Honestly, that's what my thought was. And so I was scooched as far over to the door as I possibly could be in his truck, and just, I had no idea. And then next thing I know, we're standing on this front porch, and he's talking to this older couple, and he's basically saying, I've got my kids, I can't take care of her. And so he left me there, and the house that he left me at happened to be where my sister, just under me in age, was living and had been living since she was a baby.
Okay.
They were foster parents for a lot of years, and they had had my sister for uh, 5 years at that point, 6 years, 5 years at that time. And it was a nice house, because my mom and I, we lived in, trash dump
Yeah.
apartments, and it was just really bad. And so here I was, they were showing me around the house, and I was just like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. Everything's clean,
Um,
and then when they took me into the one of the bedrooms, they were like, hey, here's your sister. And I was like, what?
oh wow.
I was like, how awesome. And we're only uh 15 months apart, I think, something like that.
Okay.
So we're really close in
Yeah.
age. And so it was like really cool because I felt safe,
Yeah.
because I had a child that was, my sister, my age, and then this older couple. They were so sweet and kind, and as soon as I got there, they were like, "Are you hungry?" And it was just, I felt like I had been saved.
Yeah, it must have been a huge relief, especially because that drive there, you didn't know what was going to happen and you were really scared. So I think maybe your stepdad that you hated so much did you a huge favor by bringing you to that house and not taking you home with him and realizing that it wasn't a good idea to keep you and so yeah, it must have been an enormous relief for you to feel safe in that place.
Yeah, it was. And I like thinking about it as, like, when Ren was doing his chapters, and he was talking about the angels in his story.
Yes.
And um I'm like, I have several angels in my story
Yeah.
as well, that and they're usually ones that you wouldn't consider to be angels in a story, like with my
Yeah.
stepdad, my ex-stepdad.
Yeah.
I see him as an angel in my story, because even though I was abused by him, um he did the right thing.
Yeah.
He did the right thing.
Yeah.
And when was I think I had turned 18. I think I was an adult. And my stepdad came to me, and this is why I call him an angel, because not only did he do what he did when I was, 6, almost 7, but when I turned 8, shortly after I turned 18, he came to me and he said, I want to apologize.
Oh,
He's like,
yeah.
I'm sorry for all the things that I did to you. He's like, he was like, I wasn't a good person. I wasn't in a good place. And he was like, I feel awful for all the things that I did and I said. And he was like, I hope that you can forgive me. And that was the first time in my life where I'd ever had an adult apologize for mistreating me.
Mm-hmm.
And so at first, I hesitated a bit, but then I was like, you know what? That's got to be the most courageous thing for him to have done, is to
Yeah.
come to somebody that he knows that he hurt tremendously, and to say, I'm sorry. That's not who I am today.
Yeah.
And so for that, he's my angel, because he was the very first adult to ever apologize for mistreating me. So
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part in the trust process also, because if you only have mistreatment going on and abuse and no one ever acknowledges what happened to you, and especially the person who did it, I mean, you can go, through your entire life not trusting anyone and not believing, because you probably, I mean, you do feel off in some ways because you think about, there's all the responsibility involved, and, is it in part my fault? And did I do something, especially as a child?
oh
And
yeah.
I think to have an adult come up to you, even if it was later in your life, and to really apologize is I think it's a great thing he did for you there, because it probably helped you gain, gain back some trust in people. And yeah, that's a great thing. And so you stayed there, and those became your parents then.
Yes. So, when they first got me, they went to the courts to get an emergency temporary
Yeah.
custody. And so they won that, obviously, because I was already in their home and they couldn't find my mom, and my stepdad was,
Yeah.
he couldn't take care of me. So then at the age of 9, um, since my sister was already living in their home, they hadn't adopted her yet either.
Oh, okay.
And so they made it a big thing, and um, they adopted us at the same time. And but one thing that happened that hurt me a lot was the last visit that I did have with my biological father. He knew that the following week we were going back to court for the final, like one of the final hearings for the adoption. And he knew that the judge was going to speak with me.
Yeah.
And um, he told me, in, he didn't mince words. He said, if you choose the Aikens, that was their last name. He's like, if you choose the Aikens, then you're not my daughter. Don't ever come crying back to me. He said that to a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
So, so, yeah, when we went to court that next week, I chose my parents. I chose my parents.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
you did the right thing for you and your sibling.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
uh,
that was at 9.
yeah, but I think people don't give kids enough credit. Adults don't give kids enough credit to do the right thing. And I think when you, especially if you haven't been, sheltered, and if you haven't been loved the right way when you were a child, you had to make all of those decisions by yourself, from a very young age. So, I mean, once you're 9, you're kind of, accustomed to having to make big decisions for yourself, and what that means,
Yeah,
and the consequences, because you've gone through so much stuff where you had to decide for yourself, or for your siblings, what to do. So
yeah,
I think adults don't give kids enough credit for that, to be able to make the right decisions. And so I think and it's really amazing you could do that, because it's a huge amount of pressure, psychological pressure from parents, to be pressuring young children to do what they want to do. So it's, yeah, it's really great you could do that. And so so then afterwards you were adopted, and you were in this new house with those parents. And what type of parents are they?
my dad, by the time I came to live with them, he was already retired. He'd been in the military. He was a chaplain in the military, and had a very long career in doing that. And whenever I came to live with them, he was still um, ministering a couple of churches on the outskirts of our town, in small towns. He always had jobs. He had multiple jobs because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She never had a job.
Okay.
And she uh basically took care of the home and the kids. She was the traditional
Yeah, yeah,
stay-at-home mom.
yeah,
And so and we usually had um not just the me and my sister, but my adoptive brother lived there as well, and I have 2 adoptive sisters that are quite a bit older than me. But then we always had uh, babies, toddlers, kids. We always had foster kids, and so um, my mom was very busy with that, and I loved it. I loved helping with the babies. I love kids,
yeah,
and so but it was a very strict home. We had to go to church every Sunday, and it was an all day thing.
mm,
And then we went to church on Wednesdays, and then usually another day during the week too. So we went to church at least 2 to 3 times a week. And I'd never been to church before that, and before I went to live with them.
Yeah.
And at first I liked it. I liked it a lot because, you get to go to Sunday school, which is where all the kids your
Yeah.
age are. You get to hang out and,
Yeah.
you color and you do these crafts and sing these songs. Um, but I was a very curious kid. I've always been a curious person. I like to know as much as I can know. And, when things don't make sense, I ask questions.
Mhm.
And so I got to an age where I started asking questions about the contradictions and kind of a bit of hypocrisy going on,
Yeah.
not just within the church, but within the Bible
Yeah.
itself. I'm like, I have questions. And
Mhm.
so I became kind of a trouble kid, I guess, because they didn't want to answer my questions,
Mhm.
and they either flat out refused or ignored me, or they would say, you don't question the word of God.
Mhm.
Anyway, as far as my getting back to my parents, um my sorry,
No, go on. All good.
i didn't
All good.
I didn't know it was going to be hard.
Go on. No problem. Take your time.
It was shortly after I was adopted, so shortly after I turned 9, that I I didn't have a name for it or didn't know what was going on, but I became the whipping boy. Anytime any of the kids did something wrong, I got punished for it. Um, if my sister did something, then, I got punished because I should have been a better example for her. I should have set a better example for her.
Yeah.
And my mom liked to, anytime I guess I misbehaved, um, she would call me names. She told me I was worthless, um, that I was um, pathetic. I was never going to amount to anything. I was going to grow up to be just like my biological mother,
Yeah.
um, and just verbally abused me and physically abused me. My dad did punish us, but it was usually we had done something wrong. We had done something wrong, and he was like, okay. He's like, I'm going to give you 3 swats or whatever. And so, he would give us 3 swats, or
Military
we'd
style.
stand in the corner. Yes. Or we would stand in the corner or whatever. His was discipline
How long did that go on for, that dynamic between you?
until I moved out at 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did
And
you ever say anything once you grew older?
anytime we tried to talk about different things that happened, um, she would remember things differently.
Yeah.
She had a different memory of my childhood living with her.
Or there's another word that comes to mind for me, gaslighting.
Yes. Yes.
And
That
I,
was definitely it.
and I think in a very, when you're in a very toxic dynamic with someone who has a tendency to overpower others, then there's definitely gaslighting going on. And it's not that people have a different memory, is that
Yeah.
they want to remember things in a way where they are right and where they are
Right.
justified in their behavior. And so
Right.
it's not that there is a different reality. It's
Mm,
that it's just gaslighting on her side to make you believe that you maybe don't remember things as they were, and that you're
mhm.
exaggerating everything, and that it was
Yeah.
that bad. And
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly why I just didn't really talk to her about anything, because I knew that she was going to, either call me a liar, or she was going to, say, oh, no, that's not how it happened. It happened this way. And
I just wanted to know, because when we talked together last time, when we were on the phone, the first time we talked, you told me about something that happened to you when you were 12
mhm.
with your mother there.
Yep.
Are you willing to talk about that? Because I think it
Yeah.
really reads into the dynamic between the both of you.
Yeah. And yeah, so when I was about 12, my mom was she was a shopaholic, and she liked to go shopping, or just even just window shopping. We didn't necessarily buy stuff when we would go to the store or whatever, but um I always liked going with her because it was a treat whenever she's like, "Hey, you want to go shopping?" Because it always meant we would stop at McDonald's and get a
Oh
Coke,
yeah,
and and we didn't get to have pop at home, so it was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yes, I definitely want to go get a Coke.
Of
So,
course.
um, so we and it was just her and I this time. So we had gone to a department store that she really liked that wasn't far from our house. And so we got there, and there was in this one area there were these all these little stands of jewelry.
Yeah.
I'm standing there and I'm looking at this, the jewelry, and there's a man, and I just noticed him because you usually don't see men in the jewelry area. Um, and so I didn't really think anything of it. I just was like, okay, whatever. Maybe he's trying to figure out something to get for his wife or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but uh, he got behind me and tried to squeeze through that space where I was standing.
Yeah.
And when he did that, he brushed up against my back,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I kind of moved a little bit. There wasn't really
Much space.
anywhere to go. Yeah, but I just tried to move a little bit because I was like, oh, excuse me, I'm taking up all the room. Um, and so he went by, and then a few minutes later, he came back again, and I was at a different little jewelry thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, when he tried to squeeze through, he grabbed me. He grabbed my hips and began gyrating on me. And um, he was excited,
Yeah.
and I was terrified because I'd never felt a man's business before, and I'd never been touched like that by a man, and so I freaked out,
Yeah.
and I just ran, and I ran, and I ran to my mom, and I didn't tell her anything. I just stood by her side, and I never left her side until we left the store. And then after that, I never went shopping with her as a child again. I didn't feel
Yeah.
safe
Of course.
going into department stores because, it became a thing. But
I'm really
I didn't tell my mom.
sorry this happened to you, Jamaica. I'm really, really sorry. That's
Thank you.
yeah, but it's well done on your part to be able to break free and run away because that's really difficult, and especially when you're that young as a child, having a grown man hold you and still have the that ability to run away and break free of that and save yourself in that moment because it could have been even worse and very different if you would have frozen up, which would, I mean, there would have been no judgment on your part, for,
Right.
I mean, if you freeze, you freeze, but that it takes a lot of courage so it's really good that you could just run away and get yourself out of that situation. That's amazing. But so you were just terrified, so you didn't say anything. But when did you tell your mother about what happened?
Never.
Never to this day?
She passed away in 2018, and I never,
And so who did you tell about it when it happened?
nobody. I didn't have anybody
Even your sister?
that I trusted. Mhm.
Why didn't you tell your sister?
At that age, when we were at that age, we were we had a lot of like sister fights.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
she'd
it is the
steal my
right
clothes.
age to be
Uh,
fighting all the time.
yeah, yeah, so we were, we were close. I loved her, she loved me, but we were fighting a lot, and so we just didn't have that close, like,
Yeah.
friendship sister thing going on yet. So I really absolutely had no one that I felt comfortable talking. Well, I didn't feel comfortable talking about it
Oh, of course.
to anyone really,
So, who was
but
the first person you told about what happened that day?
my daughter.
Oh,
Um, because when I when I knew I was going to have kids. I wanted kids. I love kids.
yeah,
And but whenever I decided when I moved out of my parents' house and found out that I was pregnant with my daughter, I swore to myself that I would not be my parents. I would not be my parents. And I would make sure that she knew that she was always loved and she was the best thing in the world. And I would, do things so differently with her. I would be someone that she could come to with her problems and we would work through them together. And so when she got to a certain age, I started telling her about my past
yeah,
and about some of the things that had happened to me. Not not just to tell her, but because I wanted her to be aware of
of course.
the dangers that are out there.
Course, yeah, sure. I did the same with my kids too. It was because I was assaulted when I was a small child, and I went through years of that. And so when I had my kids, it was very important for me to be able to have open conversations about this, and that they would understand that it is first of all, it's a normal subject to be talking about, like in general, sexuality in general, and age
Mhm.
appropriate, but you can just, you can talk
Right.
so many things and make kids aware of their own body and their own boundaries and everything. And so it was really, really paramount for me that my children were aware that this could happen, that there is danger, and there is a fine line between being aware and being paranoid, but it's still,
Right.
trying to just make them aware, and especially my daughter also, to make her aware of what can happen, and how the world works, and what's out there. So I think it's really, really important, and it allows you to have a very open relationship with your children too, when you can just they feel like they can talk about anything with you.
When I was 18, I was pregnant with my daughter, and we, my boyfriend and I, her dad and I, were not any longer. We weren't together any longer, but we still friends with benefits, I guess you call it.
Yeah,
Um, So, because I was pregnant and I was going to be having his kids, we still were hanging out, and he would stay the night with me sometimes. And we had a group of friends that were mutual that we hung out with quite a bit. And he'd come over to my apartment and, or no, he had spent the night at my apartment. I'm sorry. And so when he woke up, he told me that he was gonna one of our friends was gonna come over and they were gonna go, I think they were gonna go play
hmm,
basketball or something like that. And so he was like, I'm gonna hop in the shower and he'll be over shortly. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I left the door unlocked. And I was like, okay, no biggie. So I'm in my jammies, which are it was all the way down to my nightgown was all the way down to my ankles, something comfy because I was fairly uh, I don't I I'm trying to recall exactly how far along I was, but I was far enough along that I had a pretty good belly.
yeah,
Um, and so I just laid in bed and I heard my boyfriend turn on the shower. And so I just laid back down and I was going to try and go back to sleep because I didn't want to go with them on this outing. And next thing I know, I feel somebody getting into the bed. And I'm like, kind of like confused because I hear the water going in the bathroom still. So I'm like, he's in the bathroom.
hmm,
So I turn over and I see it's our friend. He's crawling in the bed. And um, I was like, what are you doing? And he didn't say anything. And he just kind of scooched up to where I was and kind of like to the point where he was spooning the backside of my body. And he reached and started groping me. And I was like, no, I was like, stop, what are you doing?
Mm.
You know? But he continued. And at that point, I got really scared. I got scared and I did freeze.
Yeah.
I just let him do what he wanted to do. And when it was over, I just stayed in the bed, and my boyfriend and the friend ended up leaving, and I just cried. I cried and cried and cried and cried.
And so
And
I'm so sorry, but so just it's clear for everyone at that point this happened. Your boyfriend was in the bathroom. He had no idea what had been going on.
yeah,
So when he left
yeah.
with his friend, he had no idea what just happened to you.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Um, and then I was so embarrassed and so ashamed. And because I didn't fight him off or scream at him, it was like, was it really rape if I, didn't fight him back? And I mean, I told him no in the beginning, but I didn't, I didn't scream my head off. I could have, but I just froze and I didn't. And so I didn't tell anybody about it. And again, um, I was just gonna, deal with it on my own. And it was a few days later that my boyfriend had come over to visit with me, and he was laughing, and he's like, oh my God. He was like, you hooked up with so and so. And I was like, no, I didn't. And he was like, he's telling everybody that you guys, had sex and bragging about how he got you and da 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 da. And I'm like, no, he didn't. And I didn't expand further on that. I just said, no, we didn't.
Okay.
And no, he didn't, um, because I didn't, because he thought it was funny. Not that, because he thought it was consensual.
Yeah,
He
of
thought
course. Yeah.
My boyfriend thought it was consensual because him and I were split up. So, he was just like, oh, hey, you're, being wild and crazy, having sex with, friends and whatever. Um, and I didn't want to have to talk about it. So I just, I said no. And then I stopped hanging out with that friend. Anytime, uh, we were going to be getting together and I knew he was going to be there, I wouldn't go. And
How,
I never talked about it.
how did you feel when you learned that that was what he was saying?
I felt really pissed. To be honest with you, I felt really pissed and disgusted. Um, I think probably disgusted was probably the main um, emotion that I had, because by no means it was not some tryst. We did not have, a fling or one night
Or,
stand or anything like that. It was not a good time.
but did
And so,
did you feel like he was locking you up in a situation where whatever you would say after that, you wouldn't be believed?
yeah, yeah, that's exactly how I felt. Because I was like, I didn't say anything at the time when it happened. So now he's telling everybody that, we had this, fling, we had sex. So now days later, I'm gonna be like, oh no, it was rape. How was I gonna explain that? In my head, I was like, I will seem like I'm a big fat liar.
And
Yeah.
so you again didn't say anything. And when was the first time you told anyone about what had really happened that day?
Probably 10 years after it happened.
Wow.
I was talking with my daughter's dad, and he and I are still friends to this day. And he brought up the friend, and he said his name, and um, I said, please don't talk about him. I don't want to hear about him, because um, apparently this guy had it kind of gone off the deep end. He was really heavy into drugs and things like that. And so when he was telling me about this, I was like, I really don't care. I ended up telling him what happened, and he immediately got angry on my behalf, because he was like, why didn't you tell me? He was like, why didn't you tell me? He was like, we told everyone. that you guys, I was like, I know. That's why I never told you, because you guys had this narrative going and you guys all believed that this was the story
Yeah.
and how it had all happened. And how is little old me going to come in and be like, no, that's not really what, and so I explained it to him, and he was extremely angry, and he wanted to get together with our other friends that knew the guy as well.
Yeah.
And they were going to kick his ass. And I was like, no. I was like, no, don't do it. I was like, he's out of my life. I've not seen him since that happened. I don't want to see him
Yeah.
again. I don't want to hear
Yeah.
about him again. I was like, that's all I need. I just, when you and I talk, if you do happen to run into him or whatever, please, I just leave it alone. It's
Yeah.
been too long ago. I've come to terms with it
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah.
But he was very angry when he found out that it had not been the way that he'd been told it was.
Yeah.
So
Of course. Of course. And but did you feel any kind of relief in his reaction to the truth?
I did actually, because he's always been. I met him when I was 16, and he's been like my closest friend for all of my life, or all of my
So
adult life.
so he
And
and he doesn't think that you're a liar.
yeah, yeah. And so it was really nice to be able to tell someone that I knew would believe me now in that moment,
Yeah.
and to be able to get it off my chest and actually say it out loud that, I did not give permission. There was no consent there.
Yeah.
And so it was very relieving for me to get it off my chest. And it was very, uh, it was very nice and sweet that he got angry about it, because, you know, that showed me that he really did care about
Of
me. And
course, because that is the natural reaction to
yeah,
your story, is that anyone, even if the person you would, tell didn't know you, I mean, that is the normal reaction to this situation, is to be angry that someone would do this to you. And so it is, it's just about everything in your story is about being recognized as a victim. Having that recognition, to have people tell you it has nothing to do with you, it's not your fault, and you were victimized and you were abused, and you didn't instigate anything. And it's just so important to get to that point where you do understand that, and because the more people around you acknowledge that that is your story, and that you have been through so much, and that you have to heal from all of this because you are a victim in these situations, the better it's going to be for you, the easier the better you're going to feel about all of this, because
yeah.
it's just, I think you massively lacked support in your life.
And also self-confidence. I didn't have any self-love, any confidence in myself.
Of course. You
And
have.
so that was a major thing too, was that I didn't feel like I did feel like I was to blame. I blamed myself for all
Of
these bad
course.
things happening to me. And because, why else? Why would I keep having all these bad things happening to me
Mhm.
if I didn't cause them somehow? That was the only thing that made sense to me, is that I have to be doing something
Yeah.
or saying something that's making these bad things happen to me. And I've learned through therapy. My therapist, wrote down this little quote for me, and it's in my bedroom. I have all my positive affirmations and things in my bedroom to look at. And one of the things that she, in the very beginning, was helping me get through was my guilt, my
Yeah.
shame, and my
Yeah.
guilt. Because there was a lot of shame and a lot of guilt for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so, she told me, did this happen to you? If it happened to you and you didn't do it,
Yeah.
if it happened to you, there's no blame, there's no
Yeah.
shame.
Of course. Of course.
And so that has helped a lot in healing
Yeah.
that part of myself.
Yeah, and recovering some of your, power. Yeah,
Yes.
because you
Yeah.
do have the power to make your own decisions and change things and talk and speak up, and I mean that is just you, and you're allowed to do what you want, to do you, and
Yeah.
and to be who you want to be, and not to be under anyone else's thumb in your life. You can just, decide what you want, for what's best for you.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, and I think from what we've talked when we were on the phone the first time we talked, I think you really maybe now are in a place in your life where you did regain a little bit of that, power, and
Yes.
you're feeling a little bit stronger than you did maybe in these past years.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that all began shortly after my adoptive mother passed away in 2018. I had always, all of my adult life until that point, I was still trying to please her. I was not doing very good at it, but I was still trying to please her as much as I could. But when she passed away, it was kind of like a liberation happened.
Yeah,
I was liberated. I didn't have to pretend
yeah,
to be who she wanted me to be anymore. I didn't have to try and pretend that I was this good Christian girl. I didn't have to, wear my long hair and try and look pretty. I didn't have to wear the girly clothes, to look more feminine because that's how we were supposed to dress. And um, so I really kind of broke out of my shell it slowly over the course of a few years. And then I started, I started with my therapist about 3 years ago.
hmm,
And then it just exploded. I just was like, I am going to do everything I've ever wanted to do that, I stopped myself from doing because of the way that I was raised.
yeah,
And so, I made a lot of physical changes, and, also, um, just lifestyle changes that
yeah,
I really wanted to do. So yeah,
yeah. So taking your power back.
I did.
Yeah, that's really great. And so in that moment of empowerment, and on that journey, is that also where you discovered Ren?
So my story of how I found Ren is kind of, well, it's funny because people on your show, and then I've heard it in other places too, is that, Ren finds you when you need him,
Yeah,
and or you find Ren when you need him, whatever the case may be. And
yeah, that is something
and it was,
I hear a lot from a lot of
yeah,
people.
and it's so weird because it was it was shortly after he had released High Ren,
Yeah.
the video, and I had never watched a reaction video ever. I've always been into music. I love music and I love watching music videos. And so I get on YouTube all the time and watch music videos because, I'm a kid who grew up with MTV
Oh yeah,
when there was
right.
actually being music played on it. So
Yeah.
I still enjoyed that. And so I get on YouTube to watch music videos, and I was really laser focused on this one band. I was, I like a wide range of music. I like everything from opera to deathcore.
Yeah.
So, and everything in between. I love it. And so I was really, really into this group called Lorna Shore.
Oh,
And
I
they're,
adore them. Yeah.
oh, yes. Oh
Oh,
my God.
oh yeah.
So I went down and was watching all the videos I could of them, and I came across this video of Will, the lead singer, doing a one take vocal playthrough, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then in my on my YouTube feed, it gave me a suggestion of watching a reaction
Yeah.
of somebody reacting to one of his music
Yeah.
videos or their music videos, and I was like, "Okay, that."
Hmm?
Kind of sounds cool, I guess. I'll give it a try. So
Interesting.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, new thing. So it was actually the charismatic
Oh
voice.
yeah, she's
Um,
wonderful. Yeah.
yes, and she was doing all this stuff with Will. They became friends, and doing the whole scope down his throat, and
Yeah.
so I just became um enthralled with watching videos of people reacting to them. For one, because they are deathcore, and if you look at a picture of Will Ramos, you're like, oh, he's so cute and sweet. I know he has tattoos and everything, but
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you hear him talk, he's just like the sweetest person
Oh,
ever.
yes.
And then when you hear him do his vocals, it's like,
Oh, yeah,
what?
sure. Yeah, yeah. He's
So
amazing.
I loved watching reactions to Lorna Shore because it was always so much surprise and
Oh,
like,
yeah, yeah,
holy crap,
yeah.
what the heck is this guy doing? And so it was about, I'd been doing that for, probably about a month or so, just watching all these different reactions of people reacting to Lorna Shore. And then I saw the charismatic voice had, um, a notification that she was doing a reaction to somebody named Ren in
Yeah.
a video called Hi Ren. And I was like, hmm.
What's that?
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, and I actually put it off. I didn't listen to it. And I was like, no, but I saved it. I saved
Yeah,
it in my save.
yeah.
And it was probably like a month later or so that I was like, you know what? I don't have any other videos saved to watch. I don't have any reactions to, Will Ramos to watch that I haven't watched already. So I'll go ahead and give this a
Yeah,
shot.
yeah.
And so my first introduction was watching a reactor react to Hybrid.
Okay.
And so I was watching it, and at first, of course, he first does the guitar, and it's like, okay, that's
Mhm.
good. And then he started doing the yodeling thing, and I was like, oh, hell no. And I don't know why, but I was just like, no, I
That's not,
can't. I
that's
can't.
not,
So
that's definitely not for me.
no, I was like, nope. And so I turned it off,
Oh, wow.
and I went about my life, and it was probably another month before I decided to give it another try. I was like, okay, maybe it gets better. I'm just going to give it a try. And not that his yodeling was bad. It was just, it shocked me so badly that I was just like, whoa. Um, so I did eventually watch her whole reaction to it. And then I was like, man, that yodeling was actually pretty good. That was really awesome. That, his voice is really beautiful. And I really connected with the song. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
is he talking to me?
yeah.
Is he, what? Did he,
Mm,
steal my mind and he's talking about me? It was just like so incredibly personal.
mhm,
And I felt it. And then I became obsessed.
mm.
I watched hundreds, if not maybe close to 1,000 reactions of high Ren from different reactors because I just could not stop because I wanted to feel that same feeling over and over and over and over again, how much it touched me.
Yeah.
And so eventually I did move on from high Ren because I was stuck on high Ren for a long, long time. And my second song uh to him was Chalk Outlines.
Oh,
And yeah, and again I was like,
yeah,
holy hell,
yeah.
is he in my head? Because I'm going through this right now. I'm depressed. I don't want to take these pills anymore, but I have to because I have a mental illness. And
Mm.
yes, I do take it just in case. Everything he said was like he was speaking to
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
or he was saying what I was trying to say.
yeah.
And so then it just kind of snowballed after that, and I just became obsessed with watching reaction videos to anything Ren. And um so yeah, and I did need it because at that time I was struggling mentally, um, and I had uh, I'd been sick, but I didn't know what I had yet. I'd been talking to my doctor, and repeatedly for a couple of years. Um, but when I found Ren, I had been sick maybe a couple of months.
Hmm.
And so I didn't know that I had a chronic illness or anything. So I was relating a lot to the mental health aspect of
Of
it.
course.
And, and I was just like, wow, this is powerful. How how have I not known about this guy before? Because he really is just speaking to me and speaking about me.
Yeah. And so
And
what did your what did you end up being diagnosed with?
mental health wise or chronic?
From chronic illness.
The chronic illness that was, I was ultimately diagnosed with ME/CFS,
Okay.
um, after over 2 years of me going to my doctor repeatedly saying I'm exhausted. I mean, and this is not depression exhaustion. This is something different. I kept telling him because,
Yeah.
I've dealt with the mental illness stuff
Yeah.
all my life. So I know
Yeah. Yeah.
what it
Sure.
feels like when I'm not on track.
But so that
Um,
brought you somehow even closer to Ren and his story, where you thought, oh, now I get, the rest of it and all the chronic illness part of the
yes,
songs, and so it really did encompass everything in your life then almost.
yes. And even the struggles with trying to get someone to listen to me
Yeah.
and run the test. Just
Yeah.
run the freaking test. I'm paying for insurance. I'm paying my copay.
Yeah.
I'm paying all this money to see you. Do the damn test.
Yeah.
And so finally what I did was I got frustrated with him and I sought out a new doctor, and she listened to me.
Yeah.
She asked a lot of questions and she ran a buttload of tests,
And
and
then that was it. Yeah. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
a few weeks later I had my answer.
But so how do you feel his lyrics and his music and all the art he does? How does that help you, like on a day-to-day basis?
It helps me in so many ways. As a lot of his fans are, I'm just a music lover. I love music and I've always loved music. It's been a part of my life for all of my life. I've always found it to be, it's a comfort, but it's also an outlet. If I'm angry or upset, I put on a sad song and I'll scream and cry and just, get it all out. And if I'm in a good mood, I can listen to, some happy, just, oh, this feels so good. And with Ren, it's so awesome because he's not just one genre. So, if I'm in a hip hop mood, I can listen to hip hop. If I'm in a more dark place, I can listen to one of the darker songs. If I'm, wanting some beautiful singing or just some piano or what, he's got it all.
Mhm.
And the lyrics to his music are spot on always.
Mhm.
And feels like he is literally speaking to the masses for all of us who have dealt with the medical system
Yeah.
and its brokenness.
Yeah.
And so it just, he inspires me, I think, is what the most of it is. It just, for him, one, being a man and coming out and and exposing his weaknesses, to the world,
Yeah.
which they're not
What we
weaknesses,
talked
by
about
the way.
before at the beginning of our conversation is that
Yeah,
part of being a man too. Yeah.
yeah. So I respect that from him, and just how open and just he gives his all into whatever he does, and that's just admirable. And especially with everything that he's gone through, you know, I I can't even imagine having what what he's gone through and doing what he was able to accomplish,
Mhm.
and speak to so many people on such a personal level.
So if he did see this video, what would you want to say directly to him?
Fucking thank you
Yeah.
from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. I seriously, I don't know what else I could say besides thank you. I mean, that's honestly, he's helped so much, and I'm sure that he knows that he has. He gets messages and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure, all the time from his fans, but I don't think there's anything that would even come close to saying what I want to say about him. So I'm thank you.
Well,
That would be it. Yeah. thank you for being you. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for all that he does. Really, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I completely understand what you're saying there with the, um how you feel his music, and how you listen to it, and I do the same. And I think it's just I'm really like you, music wise. I listen to everything, and I've done classical music when I was a kid. I did a lot of piano, and I've been singing in choirs, and I also went to the opera and everything. And now I'm a metalhead, but I also went to rave parties, and so I just love music, and I love hip hop, and so yeah, it's the same for me, and it's really amazing for me to find someone who just does it all. And
Yeah.
where you can just have, it's just this one source where you can have all of these flavors and just go,
Yes.
what do I want to do today? Let's have, I don't know, sad ren, or have a bit of rap ren, or it's really amazing to have that just with one artist. So I just wanted to say I'm really happy you wanted to do this episode, and you decided to open up and be so candid about your journey and your life experiences. And yeah, it's will help a lot of people, a lot of women, and a lot of people listening to this, to know that they are not alone, and that someone else is there who went through similar things. And so I think it's really, really important work you're doing there, talking about your life. It can only help the people who listen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's really, you know, what I want to do is even if it's only one person who's like, oh yeah, that part of your story, I went through that too.
Yeah.
And just to know that you're not alone in your suffering or in your healing journey, whatever the case may be. And I'm definitely on my healing journey now. So I, feel much more comfortable talking about, things that I didn't talk about for 20, 30 more years.
Well,
So,
it's
um,
apparently never too late.
yes,
Never too late
that's true.
to talk.
No, it's
Never
not.
too late.
I can tell you. No.
And it's always when I think, yeah, I think that should be, kind of what you represent here in this episode, is that it's never too late to speak up, and it's never too late to free yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. So, I mean, for anyone who listens to this, who watches this video, it's really important to know that, whatever your age is and however long ago things happened to you, you can still talk about it and find a community that will listen, that will not diminish you as a person, and that will believe everything you say. And so it's really important to get that off your chest, to free yourself from those demons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. And I am a huge advocate for mental health therapy. I think that anybody I talk to, I am constantly encouraging, even if they don't have anything, any mental illness or anything going on like that. I'm like, go to therapy. It's so awesome because you have somebody there who's not going to judge you. They're going to listen. You can get whatever you have, that's bothering you off of your chest to somebody who, is impartial. So, um, it's one of those things where that's been one of my main things is talking a lot about go to therapy. Just give it a try. You'll be amazed at how much it helps.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of my messaging is, trying to get people to go to therapy.
Yeah.
Cause here in the States, um, some people have a hard time getting therapy because a lot of insurance makes it
Oh
hard.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but there are other avenues, at least here in my area, that are available for lower income, and they do it on your income based. Um, it's an income based thing, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's available,
But
and it's definitely
oh yeah, I would say, even if you don't want to go to a therapist, or if you really can't, there are so many online communities like the Renegades, or like, different Facebook groups or, Twitch communities where you can really connect to people and have this as an outlet. If you don't want to or can't go to a therapist, then you can still have that connection with other people who will not judge and who will understand you. And even if they
Yeah.
haven't been through the same thing, they will be there to listen. So I think it's really just the fact of talking about what you've been through and what happened to you is so important to get it off your chest and to be able to move to different heights in your life. It's just so important to
Yes.
talk. But
Yes.
so thank you so much, Jamaica, for doing this episode. It's been great, and this is going to help a lot of people. So I'm really, really happy you did this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really am glad that we were able to connect and do this. So I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
me too. Well, see you soon then.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Unheard. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to get more of that. And check out the description of the video and the links in my bio to see how you can help with the research. See you soon.